that we do is like the best ever, which is like a super good feeling, especially considering the weather. Like I said before, I had really like dismal attendance before, so thank you for coming out. Joella, I met through PR.co. You guys have like crazy outfits at the Next Web last year. I'll let you maybe tell more about that. But we talked about exactly this back then. It's kind of your specialty.
We did go over this.
And that was the last time we saw each other. And then Tobias, I'll give him credit for coming on board as a co-organizer. Where I fell down is I would just get like anybody cool or interesting that I could, and they'd be on stage, and there would be like continuity. So having this kind of theme of feedback is perfect because then it kind of gives some kind of commonality across presentations. But I'll pass it to you.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Thanks. I remember that conversation. We were having a beer on the street. I think it was the after party for the Next Web. We had a super interesting conversation about nonverbal communication during your sales conversations and during your interactions with other people. And I remember John was like, oh, maybe you should come around and talk about it sometimes. So I was like, oh, okay, man, I might do that. And actually a year later it's come to fruition, so that's great. It's great to be here, nice to meet you all. Maybe you can look to your neighbor and tell them they're super good looking.
Super good looking.
I don't know. I don't know what's up with sales managers, but for some reason they're always like really good looking. So there you go, you already have your first compliment. That was a great presentation, Eric and Jeroen. I'm not sure if I will live up to the expectation, but I'll give it a go. Today I would like to talk a bit about the actual concrete, practical meeting your new sales prospect or your new client. How are you going to go about it? How are you going to keep their interest, and how are you going to make sure that you meet up to their expectation? I'm not really talking about your in-depth product knowledge or the technological aspects of it, but the real communication that you have between you. So I'm going to start with some obvious tips that I'm sure you've heard of before. Then I would like to talk to you about some feedback signals that people usually give you during conversations that you sometimes do pick up or don't pick up, and how to respond to that in a professional way. And also some do's and some don'ts. So very practical. I would like to start with the most obvious one, the handshake. So is there someone who would like to come to the front to be my little proefkonijn?
Yeah.
Yeah? That's great, thanks. Give it up. Yay.
Yay.
So good looking as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about this later, but this is actually a personal space thing. So I'll talk about this later anyway. My name is Joella. Nice to meet you. That's a great handshake.
Cheers.
Yeah, so I don't need to teach you anything.
Could you repeat that one?
Anyway, the thing with handshakes is that everyone knows that you shouldn't give like a dead fish hand, like a really cold, like horrible hand. At the same time, don't have like too clutchy and like super heavy eye contact, because that gets creepy. But what you probably didn't know, I'm not sure, is that whenever you meet someone and you're a salesperson, you're likely, because you're enthusiastic and super passionate, you make a step forward and you're like, hey, nice to meet you, and you actually enter their personal zone. So I heard this great tip from someone who was a car salesman, and he said that whenever I'm trying to sell a car, I stand still. I reach out my hand, obviously, but I let the other person come towards me, because that makes them feel in control. It makes them feel like they know what they're doing and you're not trying to push something on them. I know it sounds a bit like a trick, but it actually helps, because I know in Holland our personal space is a little bit bigger than in some other cultures. So it's nice to respect those unwritten boundaries to make someone feel at ease and comfortable. And at the end of the day, you want that person to know that you mean well with them, and you want to be. And they have to feel comfortable with you, so they want to buy your product. They don't feel like pushed into it, or they don't get defensive for it. Thank you so much.
And how about a handshake and lower
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was what I was gonna go to.
But
You're right.
I'll sit down. Yeah.
No, you can stay here.
But
You're
I'm
right.
interested to hear
Yeah. So you already know the answer. I thought this one was like even more obvious, but I'll tell you anyway. So this is like a dominant handshake. It's like it's like a father-son thing almost. Like I'm gonna tell you what to do, son. You're right. Don't do that, because that's very much a dominant thing. If you want the other person to like you, and give them the feeling that they're in control, you should slightly show your hand palm. But I'm sure you already knew that. So give that hand, you know, where you expose the palm. This is like by common peacetime. Yeah.
But it really surprised me that it works as well when you're sitting and having a meeting, and when you're showing your hands on the table, it really gives trust. And it was like a big opener for me. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Last question, not to derail you, but for me, I don't necessarily do it beforehand, but afterwards, I often use the second hands.
Yeah, that's very American.
That's super American. That just means I'm American.
That's something that George Bush would do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not even from Texas.
You know what?
What is that? What does it mean?
But I will give you this credit. It is super American. If you meet someone for the first time, and that's the instant, that's the first
But not
thing
out the
you
gate,
do.
after the meeting.
I know. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what I was.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So you give the hand, and you do that in the first instance you meet someone. They're like, hang on, you don't know me. Why are you being nice to me? That's creepy. I don't know about that. If you are doing it after you meet that person and you're like, you had a good connection, they feel reaffirmed. But that's something you do after you build a little bit of trust.
Okay.
You can't do that straight away. It's a bit too much. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not worried now.
That's great. So next thing, eye contact. Everyone knows eye contact is very important. You can't do too much, you can't do too little. If you do too little, apparently the liars, people that lie a lot, not liars, what does that mean, liars? Anyway, people that lie, they don't make eye contact for more than 1/3 of the time. So if you want people to believe you and trust you, then look them in the eye. But also, don't do it more than 70 or 80% of the time. Because if you do, you look like a serial killer or you look like you want to have sex with someone. So don't do that. Unless you want to, obviously. The sex part, not the killing part. Okay. Moving on.
There is the cultural factor as well.
The culture factor, yeah, very much.
Because there are people that they are not really looking in the eyes.
You're right. In some cultures it's more common, especially in Muslim countries. I've been told that the woman looks down and doesn't look the man in the eye because it's very intimate. And yeah, this one goes for the Western world, I would say.
No.
Yeah, but that's a good addition. I'm not sure what the word is.
Insight.
Insight, thanks. Okay, personal space, very important as well. Like I said before, the Dutch like their personal space to be quite big. I don't know why, but I have the same thing whenever you're in a bus and you're all by yourself and there's that awkward person sitting right next to you where the whole bus is empty. You're like, what, dude, really? Why are you sitting next to me? That's so weird. It's really silly because if the whole bus is full, you don't mind. You don't. But personal space is very important in sales conversations because it makes the other person feel like they're in control. That's, I think, I would say the most important part. Like Tobias said in the beginning, is that you don't feel that you push your product onto someone because people know. People have been hearing marketing stories from, I don't know, 80s, 90s, and they've been super smooth and slick, and everyone knows the obvious marketing tricks. So the most important thing, I would say, is that you listen to the client and the prospect, and that you feel, and that they feel that they can trust you, that you're being honest and authentic. I know this doesn't sound honest because there are so many tricks and tips, but there are some tips in the personal space area where you make sure that you are not higher than the other person. So if I was talking to you, you're my prospect, and we're sitting behind the table, and I start walking around, I like walking around, or I'm even walking behind you, like that makes you super uncomfortable. Probably, because that's a primal thing. We like to think that we're super modern and we're like moved on from all that primal stuff. But in fact, even if I shake someone's hand, I get into their personal space. The reason why I shake my hand is to show you that I don't have a weapon that I can attack you with. So that is the main reason why we shake hands. And the same goes, if I am behind your peripheral vision, then you feel uncomfortable because you're like, that person can attack me. And not on a conscious level, because you know that person's trying to sell you something. Which is, no, anyway. Getting behind you is something that's subconsciously in a way that makes you panic or feel uncomfortable. Just like someone who stands in the entrance of a space and tries to tell you something, you feel like threatened almost. And even that subconscious level, even if it's not that obvious, it still distracts you from the message that the salesperson is trying to tell you. So you have trouble paying attention if you get into primal mode, let's say. So
what about
yeah.
like seating of chairs and having a table in between you and stuff like that?
Yeah, a table in between you, if you feel that a person is already defensive, a little bit like defensive towards you in a way that, I mean, you've really tried for ages to get a person on the phone and plan a meeting with them. They're like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know if I want to do that. So they're super hesitant. You don't want to be all up in their face straight away, so if you place like a table between you, that would be a good way for them to feel like they have some leverage between you two, so they don't feel forced. At the same time, there's those obvious things about the round table, like, what's his name, Arthur used to do, Camelot and all that. Anyway, he was a smart guy. But then also, this is like super, I don't know, this is weird, but apparently if someone sits on the right side of you, they're more likely to agree with you. So that's super silly. But anyway, I would give it a go if I were you.
I use that a lot. The first time I went with like one of my colleagues to a hotel, and I was like all these chairs were like opposite to each other. So the first thing I did was removing the chairs to make sure that was on the right hand of the of the decision maker, and it worked. But like it's like this. I was like, what are you doing? Removing chairs? Like
You already knew that trick. That's
yeah.
cool. Yeah. So give it a go. I would say. Just give it a try. Yeah.
Is there really scientific proof for this, or is it some kind of superstition?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't say superstition. I'm sure there's done some research about it. But to be honest, statistics are the biggest liars on the planet, I think. So I'm not sure. But that's with all research. There has been a research where that has been, where that was a conclusion. I'll look it up for you, but I mean, at the end of the day, people are different and you don't know. But these are some common things that keep repeating. Yeah?
So when I do sales, my best sales are at the moment when I have a really good connection with the person and it feels really natural in communication. So when I start thinking of all this 90 degrees chair and handshakes, how can I be sure that I'm still confident and still communicate in a natural way?
Yeah, that's a great question actually. I wanted to say that for the end of the presentation, but that was my, that's basically, that covers the whole presentation, because at the end of the day you have to go with the flow. You have to go where it feels right, anticipate at the moment, like put your horns out if it feels full sprieten. I don't know. But don't actively don't actively try to mirror something, because that looks super fake. You know, that looks like someone's really trying hard, and also you're paying attention to your cues and to all the gestures that are going on, rather than listening to what the client's saying. So that's really wrong, and I think that's the main thing that salespeople. I think that's the main takeaway for all salespeople, including me. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a sales manager as well, and a commercial manager now for a startup. Anyway, I have a lot of experience in sales as well, but the main thing is that salespeople tend to talk a lot and not listen so much. But I'm going to talk about that later. Talk about it. Anyway, yeah, so what I would advise is really think about this stuff beforehand or maybe afterwards. Analyze the conversation and think about the stuff that you see that was going on, like the observations that you noticed, and write them down and maybe take that away for the next time. But in the moment, definitely listen and be in the moment rather than thinking about all these little cues and stuff. Yeah.
That's why I'm also my sales, I guess.
Sorry? Okay, feedback. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I'm sure when you go to a club and you stand there and you observe people, there's always some awkward guy who's trying to chat up a girl, and the girl is like being really polite and like, yeah, sure, that's great. And the guy's like talking to her, and she's smiling because she's being polite, and the guy doesn't notice what's going on because he reads that first cue. He reads the cue that she's smiling, but at the same time her arms are crossed, her feet point a different direction. So the important thing is to look at the cluster of gestures. So not just the smiling face, because that can be misleading. It's the whole body that tells you what's going on. And the feet really usually don't lie. So whatever the feet point towards, that's where you want to go to, or that's where you're thinking about. Fidgeting, that's like something I'm doing now. That's like, if you're in a sales conversation and someone's really fidgeting with something, or like touching their hair or whatever, doing that, being a bit nervous, then it might be the case that they're thinking about something else. Their mind is somewhere else. What that means is that they're not listening to your story, and that's that's something you really don't want. So what you can do in that moment is ask them, in a very subtle way, obviously, What did I? So
Fiddling.
yeah. So in that moment, you can ask them maybe, is this time convenient for you, or should we reschedule? Are you okay with like having a chat? Do you want to go for get some coffee? And if they're like, well, actually my mind is somewhere else. I'm really worried about this and this and this. You're actually being sympathetic and listening to them and offering them another opportunity to meet again. So in that way, they like you a bit more. So you're more likely for them to buy your product. And at the same time, you make them feel comfortable and give them the opportunity to really listen to your story, which is very important, I think. Hand gestures. This one is the classic one. It's like, I'm in control, but I'm still listening what you're saying. It's like, you have to convince me. That's what this means on the table, I mean, this way. Anything that's near the face, if it's this, they're paying attention. If the hand is slightly down and they're leaning with their head on their chin, or with their chin on their hands, then it's not going right, they're bored. Yeah, so whenever you see that happening,
I was mirroring.
shake it up. Alright, John? Yeah, okay. What are you going to do with that feedback when that happens? What do you do? Yeah, you know that you have to change something, or maybe use another approach. Be like, John, are you okay? Do you want another beer?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
One of the best tricks, this is also for when people's eyes are straying during a conversation, when you talk to people and they're like, you know, it's like really, especially when you're talking about your product and it's taking forever and you are super passionate about it, but they're like, this is all technical shit, I don't care about this. They're looking and they're like straying, they're thinking about the drinks that they're having after work, etc. So what you do then is you call them by name. And that's like super conversational, but at the same time, that's the sound people love to hear the most, the sound of their own name. So if you call people, you're like, hey Eric, UK, or this is like a trick a little bit, where I'm like saying, well, the technical specs are changing, we're having a new feature, and then you kind of like doing that. I'm like, Eric, did you know about our latest feature? It's amazing. And then talk about it, and they're almost waking up, like, oh yeah, that's right, and they feel important because you mention them by name. This is a trick that shouldn't be used too often because it will seem like a trick a little bit too much. And maybe change your pitch as well if you have to do it too much. But also, if you feel that's a little bit too obvious, you can also use brand names that start with the initial of that person. So Eric, for example. Like, you know what, Ericsson use our product as well. Something like that. And for some reason, psychologically, that entices people as well. So that's something to think about. The leaning back as well. So sometimes you're talking to someone and they're super comfortable, they're like in a dominant alpha male position. They're like, yeah, you can talk all you want, but I'm not sure if I'm into this. So you sit that way, and you're like, hang on, as soon as someone's not on the edge of their seat, they don't care as much, and I want them to care. So what do? You give them a flyer. You're like, hey, have a look at this. All the prices are on here or something, you know. And then they lean back in. And in their mind, it actually changes the way that you sit, changes your psychological behavior as well, and your willingness to listen to the story. So that helps people to get back into the story as well. So these are some feedback tips. Any questions so far?
Yeah, my question is, basically this is when we have a face-to-face conversation. The biggest challenge is it's when you do it on the phone.
Yeah, you're right.
Because you actually have all this non-verbal communication, but it's not as easy to notice on the phone. So do you have some tricks for sales on the phone?
That's a really good question, and you're right. I think cold calling, like you said before, you don't like it as much. I don't like cold calling. I don't know anyone
But it could
who
be
does.
a warm call, you still pick up and tell them.
Because in a sense, no one likes to be rejected in a way, and you feel rejected even if it's not on a personal level, like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. Anyway, I would say, for example, if I'm calling someone, and I've never met the person, but I want to talk to them, I'm pretending like I know them. If I want to go past the gatekeepers, I'm like, yeah, George, I spoke to him last week, would you mind putting me on the phone? And then they usually just transfer you. I mean, okay, maybe you don't have to lie, but you can say at least, can you put George on the phone for me? He knows me, or something.
But what I meant is more like when you're doing your sales pitch, for example, you hear people smiling on the phone. You can hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
do you have some other tricks like this when you're doing your pitch? You cannot feel everything, of course. You cannot
Yeah.
see the position of the people,
Mm.
but you can still maybe, I don't know. You can tell me the non-verbal communication. You can still feel it on the phone.
Yeah, that is a super difficult one. The only thing that I would say is that if you stand up and if you smile during your conversation, you're very energetic and active, and I think people can hear that on the phone, and also you're more alert. What I do when I do cold calling, I'm very honest. So I try to see if there's a connection, and then I would say what kind of companies are perfect to use our tool. And if I feel that there's no connection, or they feel that it doesn't suit their needs, then I'm like, you know what, I'm just calling because I think that this would benefit you. I'm not trying to, I'm really looking for a win-win situation, and in that kind of way, like really be open and honest about it. Yeah, but no tricks, sorry. No.
But
Did
you
you want
can
to-
you can look for like the tone of voice. Is it high or is it low? And are they welcoming you? And the pace on which they're talking to you. And then just be super witty and have a response to that. I
And
think.
ask questions.
Yeah.
I always, when you do cold calling, it's way better to start a conversation not by pitching your product, because then people forget to listen. And then just start asking questions about the business and what they're doing, because they love to talk about themselves. Everybody
Yeah,
loves
no,
to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
And then through that, you can just slowly get the conversation in the direction you want it to go to.
Well, even back to your other point, like even beforehand on confirming if the time is still good for them, but asking if it's still a good time for you, and that goes right into your other point, or like if they're busy, if they have a deadline, or their kid is sick, or whatever, then you just ask that out the gate, and you immediately give them an opportunity to say, oh yeah, sure,
Yeah. You know what?
Question there?
Or if there's a lot of silence, the person is thinking and doubting, so you can ask quick questions for which the answer is easy.
Yeah.
So yes, you should always answer.
Yeah.
Easy question in between, which is a yes, so this speeds up the speed for
Yeah.
voice to.
There are some super hardcore tiger techniques to really, sell your product. But that's not what you want. You want in the end a happy client. So I wouldn't say to go for force people to say yes. And if they say yes 4 times in a row, they go for the yes in the end. I wouldn't say that. I would say more like what John says. What I do in the real meeting as well. I ask, is it a convenient time that I'm calling? Would you mind if we reschedule? I'm calling because I want to make an appointment with you. I always say that. And then they can be like, oh, why do you want to have an appointment with me? And then I can explain a little bit. Because that very straightforward puts people a little bit off guard, and it's a different approach, and they're like, oh, hang on, and they start thinking about it a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, you told a lot about non-verbal and verbal things, and I'm wondering about mirroring the other person. Is it something you advise, like to do the same gestures as they're doing, or?
Yeah, mirroring is a thing. And it works, but actively trying to mirror someone is usually, people pick up on it because it's not authentic. So, I don't know, I guess you could try to do it. One time I had a fight with a friend, well not like fight, but we were arguing a bit, and we were sitting next to each other, and I was like sitting down, and she was sitting here. And then we couldn't figure it out. And then at one point I was like, hang on, I'll do this. So I'm pointing my feet towards her, and then she started mirroring me, doing the same thing, and then we worked it out. I'm not sure if that was the reason that we worked it out, but changing my mindset, making her mirror me, that helped. And apparently you mirror people when you agree with them.
Yeah, or you like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's you feel kinship at that moment. What that does is when you chameleon to each other, it creates a psychological effect of feeling related to that person. So that's why it's something that they call attuning. I'm not sure if you've heard of the term, and it helps to feel related to someone else. And the people we feel related to, we are more likely to open up to because we feel safe talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Yeah. That's
Subconsciously, it's even better if it's subconscious, because then we feel like, hey, this is someone, one
questions? At the end of the day, I would say go with the flow. So whatever signals you're picking up, register it, or maybe even write it down, but analyze it later and stay in the moment and really try to listen to the client. And by the way, the best way of doing that is also to summarize. So if you lost track a little bit, or they're talking a lot about the product and you're not following, like, hang on, if I understand correctly, you're trying to say that, blah blah blah. And then the person feels like you're actually really making an effort to listen to them. That also really helps. And look for clusters. So yeah, sure.
I feel like all the techniques you talked about, what they have in common is that they show that you are concerned with the needs of the other person. Would you say that is right?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I think at the end of the day, I was talking earlier to the guy, sorry, I forgot your name. The one with the big blue eyes, over here.
What? Who?
Sorry, your name. I forgot your name. Yeah, you.
Me, Stefan.
No, in front of, sorry.
Oh,
The one with
Yeah,
the...
right.
Jacob, that's right, sorry. Oh, God. I'm sorry, I'm horrible. I was talking to you earlier, and you said that there are a lot of salespeople that try to do what's right for the client, and that clients are usually very defensive and very scared that you're trying to push something on them that they don't want to have or they don't need to have. And I think the main thing of understanding body language is to really create a win-win situation for both parties. I think, I would say. Yes. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So in the past, I was always like really extreme about like punctuality and like the schedule, and I'd be like posting like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I wasn't that worried about it this evening. I felt like everybody was super engaged. The talks were super good, so we're like way over schedule, but I think that's okay. So I don't know as far as like how much beer we have left or how much time everyone has left. I think I'll count on desk bookers to let us know when we need to leave. When should we leave by?
Don't ask me.
But at any rate, the next one will be more than likely at the Folks Hotel at the end of April. I wanted to have the date confirmed this evening. I've always sucked about that, actually. Tobias is trying to help me make it happen. Sales Hacker AMS is the Twitter, and that's where I posted. I think everyone's in the meetup as well, so I announce it via meetup. But I wanted to thank everyone for coming. I mean, for me, this is super cool. I mean, I didn't mention it yet this evening, but I always saw software developer colleagues of mine that benefited from going to talks and meetups and things.
Yeah.
And salespeople never had that. They were just kind of doing the same thing all the time for 5-10 years or more. And this is super cool. And tonight was probably the most like collaborative. The last thing I would say about like the leaning forward thing, one of the classic like tricks, maybe it's American again.
Oh, I forgot to say that.
But,
yeah.
But
that was in the speech, but I forgot.
So like assuming that everyone knows like their ideal customer profile, they know the sales process steps, like it takes this many steps to them actually signing and giving you money, and the ball's in your court or their court or whatever. But if you kind of just jot that down, you could print it if you're fancy, but I'll just write it down. Like, well, typically it works something like this, like where do you see yourself? So if you're meeting face to face, again, I think in the future, I'll give Jacob props for it. Maybe in the future we could just focus on like email or phone feedback or something like that as another theme idea. But if you put that their way, they'll do the lean forward thing, but they'll say where they are in the sales process, and the extra like icing on the cake or the cherry on top is you're like, well, our most successful customers or a typical customer typically follow a process like this. Where do you see yourself? And they'll tell you, like, we're evaluating competitors or this and that, like whatever those steps are, and they have to lean forward and give you feedback on that. But at any rate, so thank you everyone for coming this evening, and at the end of April will be the next one, and yeah, well, I'll count on you guys to kick us out when we're done.
All right.